Have you ever wondered why some people who struggle with addictive behaviors of a sexual nature, they remain struggling week after week, month after month, year after year? And others who have equally embedded patterns in their life, their journey of recovery is different. They end up finding real freedom, real movement in their journey, and they truly experience breaking free from those same patterns. What is the difference in those two experiences between those who remain bogged down and stuck and those who find real freedom? Today on Pastures on Porn, we're going to talk about finding traction in your recovery. Well, today I want to cycle back and address pastors and ministry leaders in the same way I would address any struggler in recovery. Remember, in an earlier episode, I described, we need to start by bringing pastors up to the waterline of common humanity. They are people who struggle with the same struggles that everybody else has. And because of that, let me just say there are also very much some of the same solutions and same tools that can work for pastors and leaders that work for anybody because their struggles are the same. And in my journey, I've developed a real passion to help people in a couple different areas. The first one is, as you've guessed, is helping current pastors and ministry leaders to find places to turn and find sources of help and hope as they seek to find recovery and as the remaining pastors. The second one is to help any struggler, especially in their early stages of recovery, to help them break free from some of those things that have caused them to bog down and find real momentum and freedom in their recovery. And as I shared as we opened, I have experienced being bogged down for years in my attempts at recovery. But I also believe and have found real freedom and momentum in my journey that I want to share with you today as well. And I think we can go from being bogged down to being set free and finding real freedom and traction in this journey. And I want to really use this idea of traction. It's a very important, word picture that I want to use. And to do that and express the difference between these two realities, the difference between being bogged down and finding recovery traction, I want to use a story about when we moved down to where we planted a church here, and we moved into a rental, this big farmhouse on this 40-acre nut farm. And we burned a lot of wood then. We were trying to save money, had this big wood stove, and we'd go out and collect wood from the nut trees that they would often prune during the winter months. And so I would go out, we'd use our van for everything, and I had this front-wheel drive van, and it was about March, maybe the end of March, and I looked out at the field, where all these trees were, and I thought, you know what, the ground looks pretty stable. I think it looks dried out enough. I kind of walked around a bit, and it seemed pretty firm. And I thought, I can get in the van, and I can start driving around and picking up wood. Well, I only got a short ways onto the field before the wheels started to spin, and I knew I was in trouble. Now I could, by keeping the gas just the right amount, I could keep the van moving forward, but I tried to turn around to get back to firmer ground. But it wasn't long before I hit a soft spot and all movement stopped. At that point, I hit the gas, the wheels began to spin, and no amount of careful, gingerly trying to rock back and forth would work. All it accomplished was me sinking deeper and deeper into the ground. And for again, a good dozen years in my recovery process, that really did sum up my efforts. I would go for a few weeks, maybe a month or two before I was back in a relapse and all of the shame cycle that accompanied that. And just like in the field, I would have a little bit of traction, but the wheels would start to spin and eventually I would be stuck. In the real life example, I got my kids out and I tried to get them to help push me out, but they were like no help. All they did was mock me and said, "Dad, why did you drive out here? You knew you were going to get stuck." So of course, they had their, little jabs at me. And so I told them all to go back to the house. And they reminded me of all those well meaning people who really are useless when it comes to actually giving you any sort of real help in the struggles that you have. So the solution was, you probably guessed, I had to humble myself. I had to go next door to a farmer who had a tractor and have him bring me out his tractor and tow rope. And eventually he pulled me out of the field. Now, as I got closer to the edge of the field, the ground got firmer and I began to finally get some traction. And eventually I didn't need his help anymore. I got the traction momentum and actually could have driven out the rest of the way without his help and the help of the tractor. And it's that idea of traction that I really want to switch to, and I really want to use in talking about this journey of recovery. I grew up in a small Canadian town. It was about 2,000 feet above sea level. And as a result, we received a significant amount of snow every year. Unlike the west coast of US or Canada, you'd be crazy to leave your summer tires on all winter. They just did not provide the traction that was needed to drive on the winter roads. Now, in this analogy, every wise person where I grew up, they switched from summer tires to winter tires. And they would essentially, that would usually work. As long as they stayed on the main roads, they were usually okay with winter tires driving around. Now, there were the real manly men, the loggers, those that were out driving off the main roads on logging roads. They were really smart, of course, and they would have the trucks, the four-wheel drive trucks that I never had. So with their winter tires and their four-wheel drives, trucks, they could go to places where I couldn't go because they had a much better grip or much better traction on the road. Now, there were those that even that was not enough. They actually had their winter tires studded. They had little metal studs put in their winter tires. Now, you weren't supposed to use those tires on bare roads because it would damage the roads, but it gave traction. You could go almost anywhere if you had studded winter tires. And then finally, in the mountain passes, there would be times where there'd be a snowstorm that the roads would be shut down, or the police would be there, and the only people that they would allow through were those who had chains on their tires. Traction at the highest level. And so, while right now I'm doing this podcast, it's early December 2018. And almost every night on the newscast, American, US, doesn't really matter. You're seeing all of these winter storms hitting, and you're seeing all of these drivers who have driven off the road. They have rear-ended other people. Sometimes there's chain reactions. They have caused all sorts of damage to themselves, their vehicles, and other people because their vehicles did not have the necessary traction. I have driven off the road many times in real life and in my addictions. I once even tried to pass a snowplow because it was going too slow with predictable results. So I've learned everything about being Canada's worst driver or whatever. And I'm sure, so I know all about bad traction and bad choices. So having said that, let's apply that example of tires and traction to the idea of recovery. And one of the things, let me just say, is my experience of embedded addictive behaviors is not everybody's experience. First of all, there are some of those people who just seem to drive around on summer tires and, they don't really seem to have a problem. They stay on the roads and they don't seem to have a problem, and God bless them. That's not my story. Then there's others who maybe are a little more cautious. They go from maybe summer tires, they put on all season tires just in case. They think, you know what, just in case I should have some extra tread in my life. And I could struggle. I don't, but I could. So I need to be careful and prepared. And generally that works for most winter driving in certain areas. But then there's those who struggle at a lot deeper level with addictive behaviors, and they go, I am in conditions that need winter tires. I need extra care and preparation. They might hit a rough patch in their life, just like a rough patch of the road, and they find themselves slipping into destructive behaviors or addictive patterns. And for those people, it might not have been a life altering addiction, but it becomes an episodic thing or a season of their life. And they go, with the help of a tow truck or a tractor and some clear instructions and a supportive network, I can get back on the road and regain some of the equilibrium that has usually characterized my life. Finally, there's those like me that need four-wheel drive, posi track, studded snow tires, and still need a tow truck because they have made choices and done things that have resulted in them going off the road over and over again and unable to get back on. So it is for people like me where addictive patterns such as porn and masturbation and lust have become so embedded that no amount of careful driving will allow me to stay on the road. So how do people like me gain traction and find some momentum and break free? I don't want to be that type that remains stuck in their addictions. So I want to share 2 or 3 principles that have helped me finally break out of that mud bog, finally get back on the road and begin to experience real momentum and freedom. So here's just a few principles that maybe have helped. Here's the first principle. There is no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet or single tool that will suddenly change your addictive struggles. In recovery, the people you most want to avoid are those who use the line, all you need to do is blank. Now, I'm not sure how much of my story I've shared about all the things that I've tried in recovery, but one of the things I did is I drove about an hour early in my recovery to a mega church and went to a course that happened every week. And it was all about finding freedom from unwanted sexual behaviors. And about the third week, they brought a counselor in who shared that all we needed to do was recognize that the old nature was dead and that we were a new creation in Christ. If we got and recognized that, realized that all these old behaviors would simply fall off or fall away. I mean, I was so frustrated with him because it was like he was preaching this version of Christian Zen that would like, if only you can come to this point of illumination. If you could grasp this, then all of your problems would disappear and all of these struggles with sin would go away. And this new illuminating truth would guide your life going forward. And it was just, I could never get there. I could never just have that nirvana Christian moment where it would all suddenly come clear to me. Now, I do believe that good theology about our identity as believers is helpful. But I felt so discouraging and unhelpful to people to say all you need to do is have this one magical principle to set you free. There's a great recovery saying that goes like this: it takes what it takes. And I early on said, I am going to need to collect a number of tools if I am going to have a chance at this thing. If I'm going to have a shot at developing the momentum that I need. One of the tools was simply learning to go to a group. Early on, there was no group around sexual recovery. I went to an AA group for 9 months, every Thursday lunch hour, simply to learn honesty and humility, what that looked like in a group context. I would just say, well, my name's Vernon, I'm a struggling sinner, a recovering sinner, and they'd all laugh at me. But here was the point. I needed to develop the tools of honesty and humility, and then also to learn to go to a group. That would be really important for me. Another tool I began to apply was I was afraid that I would get to the point where others would begin to give me consequences for my actions. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility around developing some reminders or consequences. They're not punishment. They're simply reminders about what my behaviors cost me. I always figured if I don't get caught, it doesn't cost me anything. So I said, well, that's a lie. So how do I take control of that? So for example, I would go every Every time I acted out with porn, I would begin to volunteer. I would volunteer at a local homeless shelter to remind me that there was effects of my actions. And for me, that was a big deal because I hate going out at night. I mean, not a very good thing for a pastor, but I mean, the people at the homeless shelter really appreciated my help. They didn't know why I was there, but it reminded me. It was a tool that I used. Every time I applied a tool, I would get some forward momentum. Eventually, however, um, eventually some of those 30 years of habits, though, would pull me back, and I would simply have to look for yet another. I had a tool or something else to increase the movement or direction in my life. Here's the principle number 2: time plus a multiplicity of tools equals traction or equals breakthrough. I mean, I tried so many different tools along the way, and that was important for me. But I needed to try many things. It takes what it takes. Let me give you a different example. And okay, this is a radical change of word pictures, but I want to introduce to you Canada's national animal, which is a beaver. Now, I don't know where we came up with the idea of a beaver. I mean, sure, it's industrious and hardworking, but it seems like mostly a dentally challenged rodent to me. In fact, anyone who's ever had any exposure with beavers knows that they're mostly just pests. And what beavers do is beavers chew down trees and they build dams. That's what beavers do. And those dams cause a backup of water and they cover people's fields and they cause all sorts of problems. They're just pests. So now, in this analogy, track with me here. A beaver dam has been built on your property. The water, the fast flowing water, or this nice stream that flowed through your property is now backing up onto your fields and creating all sorts of damage. So what do? Well, you show up on the scene, you shoot the beaver. Sorry, PETA, but that's important. And now you have to break up the dam. You get out your hip waders, and as you begin to approach this dam, you begin by taking branch by branch, limb after limb out of this log jam. Now, no single branch on this dam that has been built is going to start the water flowing again. But eventually you take 1 or 2 branches away and a chunk of the dam breaks away with the pressure of the water. You finally have flow, momentum, traction. Now, in this goofy example, each branch is like a tool or step that you make in recovery. And you stick with it until eventually you pull away enough branches that the breakthrough happens and the water begins to flow and things begin to come together. It's like a tipping point, to use that author's example. You hit a tipping point in your recovery. Now let me share some of the tools that went into the tipping point that happened with me. First of all, let me talk about this whole idea of a Sherpa guide. For years, I helped people who were behind me in their recovery. I mean, one of the tools, helpful tools, is begin to reach out, look back, and help people who are not as far along as you, but as you help them, it helps cement and reinforce your own recovery. And it was true. It was very helpful for me as one of those tools in my recovery. But unfortunately, using the idea of climbing Mount Everest, I never had somebody who was ever able to climb to the summit in my life working with me, who had been to the summit, who had also struggled with my same behaviors and addictions, but had actually been to the summit of Mount Everest and now could say from my experiences, this is how you journey from where you are to where you want to go. And I finally connected with a mentor who worked with struggling, sexually addicted men, somebody who identified with my struggle but had years of freedom and experience. It was absolutely crucial. That was the first thing. Second thing I did is I actually joined an online community of men. Most of them had longer recovery than I did, which was a huge change from the 10 plus years where I journeyed with people who were struggling way more frequently than I was. And as I got involved in a freedom community like that, it had a huge difference on my life. The next one that I did was that I think gave me real freedom was I'm just going to call the power of podcasts. I mean, let me say it this way: I get up every morning, and I'm not sure if God wants me to go porn free that day. Well, I know He did yesterday, but today's a new story, right? And so, in this crazy example, God usually says to me, you know, Vern, that's still my intention for your life. That's still really what I want of you. And this is the reason why. That's called my daily quiet time. I get up in the morning, I read my Bible, I listen to God, and He usually reminds me this is the sort of man He's called me to be. But the second part of that is I'm not sure if I want to be porn free that day. Sure, God does, but here's the question: do I want that in my heart, in my spirit? And every day, virtually without fail, I get up, put my headphones on, go to one of my recovery podcasts, whether it's Porn Free Radio or Pure Desire or Power of Purity or Pirate Podcast, on, and I basically listen to my podcast, and it reminds me this is why I want to be porn free today. And I go, yeah, that's what I want today. Okay, and here's the last thing that really brought about traction for me. And this may sound a bit leveraged to you, but I did something that took me from two-wheel drive into four-wheel drive. I began to put some skin in the game. In other words, I began to spend a good chunk of money on my recovery. Every month, it costs me this journey of recovery. Every month, I pay for mentoring or counseling. I buy materials. At this point, I've spent thousands of dollars in my recovery. Now, you might not need to spend thousands of dollars, but if you're trying to experience a free recovery with no skin in the game, I'm not sure that's really what's necessary. I ended up I don't know what it was, but when I actually started putting some money into it and actually paying for a mentor, paying to be in a group in these situations, maybe it's where my treasure is, my heart is, I don't know, but it really did change the equation for me. I'm just throwing it out from somebody who still spends money every month on my recovery. And here's the third principle: traction is individually discovered. This whole idea again is it takes what it takes. I don't know what it will take for you. Some of the tools I mentioned, and there's many others, may give you more traction than others. One of the reasons why I am so big on individual mentoring, group mentoring is important as well, is it can help give sort of the individual forensic help that a Sherpa guide can give to help apply some of these tools into your experience. Okay, so here comes, take a deep breath. Here comes where I want to provide you an opportunity that you can receive help. Again, there's lots of great help options for help online. Trust me, a dozen years ago, there was virtually nothing. But I simply want to offer to you a couple suggestions as to how I may be able to be of help to you in your situation. The first one is the website that I've already mentioned, bandofbrothers.care. And on that website, bandofbrothers.care, there is a way for you to connect with both individual mentoring from myself, coaching. I'm a Braveheart certified mentor, as well as group counseling. We're in the process of developing groups for both lay people and also those in current ministry. Safe, accountable, confidential groups that can help flesh this out. I also wanted to introduce a course that I've just finished. Well, I finished the first quarter of the course. It's called, no surprise, Finding Traction. And it really is to help the early struggler to gain the first year of freedom from sexually addictive behaviors. And I, in that course, walked through 52 lessons that helped me break free completely from some of these behaviors. And I believe if that course can be really instrumental, along with the support of others, along with perhaps groups, to really help you gain the traction you look for. I mean, ideally, that material is best done with a mentor or a trusted friend to really work through that honestly and humbly, that material. What I do in this course is it's a holistic course, and I oscillate back and forth between helping people build awareness, helping them develop connection with others, and then helping them delve into some of the healing aspects that are necessary to deal with wounds and pain, some of the things that underlay the reasons why you got into a behavior in the first place. It's kind of like my son who does weight training tells me, Dad, he says, you need to work on different muscles, corresponding muscles, if you're going to develop a well-rounded physique, which I don't have, but he does. And let me just also say each lesson has a topic. There's also a tool that you can use to apply it. And finally, I've gone through and curated some supporting resources to reinforce the idea. So again, there's lots of help online. I did want to introduce you to the website, bandofbrothers.care. And more specifically, if you go to that website, you will find access to the course called Finding Traction. The first 13 weeks have just gone up on the material. It's going to be previewed. I'm just going to be interviewed online in the Restored Summit, online summit that's coming up here December 2018. That makes reference to that. So I'm hoping that can provide some help for you. I'm hoping you may be able to find your way into groups. If you can't find your way into groups locally, maybe this might be an avenue that can be of help to you. So here is to you breaking free from the things that have held you in the mud, to getting back on the road, whatever word picture you want to use here. I pray that you would find God's traction in your life. God bless you.